Over the course of A Song of Ice and Fire, we are subjected to the reign of crappy kings. From drunken war heroes who never wanted the throne to begin with, sociopathic devil children born of incest, to paranoid madmen looking for any excuse to create human bonfires. Why is this, you ask? Because it's Westeros, my friends. And as stated in a previous video, the hero doesn't win just because they're the hero, the bad guy doesn't get their comeuppance just because they're the bad guy, and rarely does the one who is worthy of the honor of power have it bestowed upon them. At least not without getting brutally punished for it. But what if we, at the Fandome, stuck a sword in a stone? A sword that we'd enchanted with spells that meant it could only be pulled out by one who is worthy to be called king, with no amount of raw strength able to budge it. Nice try, Tywin, but Gregor can't help you here. Who, in our opinion, do we think could pull it out, and why? Well, that's today's video, guys. Books or show? We're going all in with the books on this one for a change. Also, just to be clear, whomever proves themselves worthy doesn't get lumbered with the current King's Landing roster. They can pick their own staff and council and so forth. This is who's got those kingly qualities, not who's best at playing the Game of Thrones in a nest of spiders and snakes. We've already done a video on that over here, guys. Before we go through our list, we've got to stuff in the usual plea for you to like and subscribe. All praise the algorithm. And of course, our Discord is over here. If you want your video suggestions to be noted and not be lost in the void, this server is the best place to do it, guys. Just ask Cal and Big Mike over in the server. Before we get started in earnest, we've got one honorable mention, and that's Tywin Lannister. Tywin has kind of already sat the throne through 2 proxies, so we've seen what he's capable of as a king of sorts. And yeah, he's not bad by any means. He can make friends with enemies, crush threats to his legacy, well, from the outside at least, and he did a good job of balancing out the weak and deplorable traits of his grandsons. Fair to say he'd be a decent king while alive, but his legacy would have ended with his reign, that's for sure. Now on to our actual choices, and at number 5, we've got Rhaegar Targaryen. Now, this spot comes with an extremely big caveat, and that is, the choice is predicated on the notion that the show depiction of Rhaegar and Lyanna eloping together is also accurate for the books, and is through choice and love, not kidnapping and other dastardly deeds. We need to make that clear up front. Rhaegar had a lot of kingly qualities. He was exceedingly intelligent, noble, and honorable, at least according to those who knew him, so take that with a rose-tinted grain of salt. He loved the small folk and was in turn loved by them, famously sneaking out of the castle to play music for them. He was, by all accounts, caring and compassionate, and he wasn't afraid to pick up a sword and fight if necessary, despite having no passion or interest in violence whatsoever. Sir Barristan, who is absolutely a word to trust in our books, believed Rhaegar would have made a fine king, although his point of comparison might not exactly be ironclad, seeing as how the 3 kings he served weren't exactly paragons of the role. A well-behaved horse is probably also a fine king in his eyes. As for Rhaegar's most kingly quality, his sense of duty. Rhaegar knew how to put the needs of duty above his own desires. As previously mentioned, he was a gifted musician and he had a great preference for reading, often preferring his books and his harp over his sword and his lance. But when duty dictated he step up and learn to fight, he applied himself and became, by most accounts, an exceptionally capable warrior. Something to note is this guy once beat Arthur Dayne in a joust at the tourney of Harrenhal. You know, that Arthur Dayne who was considered the finest living knight by Ned Stark. Fair to say he learned to be a bit above average. Point being, while he didn't want to learn to fight, he did so because he knew his duty to the realm required it of him, and when a certain usurper started causing a bit of a dynasty-crushing fuss, he didn't run and hide. He donned his armor and died fighting for what he believed in, which many suspect was to save the realm from the impending others. As for Rhaegar's biggest flaw as a king, he was quite single-minded. Rhaegar had a singular goal that came above all else, fulfilling the Azor Ahai prophecy and protecting the realm from the others. It seems everything Rhaegar did was always in service to this goal, from trying to remove his father all the way to running away with Lyanna to get the correct number of heads for his dragon. Now, it sounds grand and it sounds noble, but you have to remember, this one-track mindedness did cause an easily avoidable war that devastated the realm and near on destroyed his family line. If he was happy to accept that as a consequence of his actions, you really do have to ask where would the line have been drawn between the needs of his people and his need to fulfill the prophecy. We never got a chance to see his obsession consume him thanks to someone's £30 warhammer attending an appointment with his breastplate, but this obsession had the potential to turn really dark. Just how many lives would have been an acceptable price? But I guess we'll never know, so on to our number 4 pick, and we've got Edmure Tully. Why are you laughing, guys? We're not joking. Now, this one was Tom's suggestion, and initially my thoughts went straight to this scene from the show. But then I realized that the show version of Sansa, Bran, and post-season 5 Tyrion actually have no fucking right to laugh him down like this after the shit shows they've caused. What exactly has Edmure done up to this point that is even remotely close to the disasters those three have caused? Failed to fire an arrow at its mark, and failed to kill the mountain due to incomplete orders. Yeah, that totally stacks up with the untold death and destruction their actions have caused. Most unworthy by far, eh? In fairness though, show Edmure is a bit of a glory-seeking, bumbling buffoon, because much like a certain Manus, I don't think D&D were personally very fond of the character, and because of this, we don't really think twice about how unsuitable a king he would make. Edmure in the books, however, is less of an incompetent moron and more of a gentle soul and an extremely compassionate person, but also rather brave and willing to step up to the plate when it counts. Using his experience and actions during his time as Lord Paramount, which is kind of like a mini-kingship, we see that Edmure is willing to do whatever he can to protect his people, and he's not afraid to get stuck in when it comes to warfare. He's not the best military commander, nor the shrewdest politician, but he's definitely capable enough when it really counts, and is far from unintelligent. I mean, he did coordinate the defense that beat back Tywin at the fort, and he also gives Robb some solid advice at times, especially regarding Rickard Karstark, that the young wolf really should have bloody heeded. He's definitely not inept at what it takes to rule, and actually has quite an even and balanced temperament that can serve a king well, especially if he surrounds himself with good advisors. As for his most kingly quality, we've already said it, it's his compassion. Edmure sees those under his rule in the Riverlands as his responsibility to protect, whether a small village or a steadfast keep. Edmure will do whatever he can to ensure you are defended, even at the cost of overextending his own forces. He may not have the cold heart to be a great battle commander, but he's got that no-man-left-behind mentality that can inspire love and loyalty in others. He would not allow his people to suffer under his rule, even if he has to make personal sacrifices, as demonstrated when he allowed the small folk to take up refuge in Riverrun. When a king cares for his people quite often care for him, and in this regard, Edmure would be a very loved protector of the realm in our opinion. As for where he's flawed as a ruler, he's a bit too much of a people pleaser. Sometimes kings have to make hard choices and take sides. Like a parent teaching their child the world doesn't revolve around them and their wants, sometimes you have to use the word no for their own good. It's the same for Edmure. I don't want to say he lacks balls, because I'm sorry, the guy is brave when it counts, but he often wants to make everyone happy, from his small folk to his lords and bannermen. It's just not possible to achieve that 100% of the time without severely compromising and weakening your own position and power. And that's just on the scale of the Riverlands. Could you actually imagine trying to accomplish that across the 7 kingdoms? It's a wonderful idea on paper, or in a world of unicorns and fairies, but this is Westeros. Happiness is often measured on the scale of just how little the world decided to fuck you over today. Out of everyone in this video, he's definitely the most in need of wise and stern counselors by his side to remind him that he has a pair of balls and needs to be harsh now and then. But seriously, we're not joking. We actually think Edmure's got the right attitude and temperament to be a great king. On to our number 3 spot and our most balanced pick, and it's Stannis the Manus Baratheon. Can we count Stannis, Tom? I mean, in the eyes of true believers, he's the one true king already. So like Tywin, he's ineligible, is he not? I suppose we can use the semantic argument he hasn't sat the Iron Throne yet. Yes, let's go with that. Of those who we know for sure remain breathing in Westeros at the end of Dance, none are more capable or worthy of the title king than Stannis. No bias, promise. He's not the most compassionate man, and he's not above a bit of shadow baby assassination and nephew leeching. But for what it takes to be a king, Stannis has just got the right stuff. He sees leadership as a duty to others, not as a means to power, which is a great start for a worthy king, but not his only quality. He's supremely intelligent, a great military commander, arguably the most skilled one still breathing, and despite not faring too well with the nobility, he quite often wins the hearts of the small folk under his rule, due to his willingness to always suffer alongside them, rather than look out for numero uno when things get tough. He's also very honourable, but not blinded by the shine of when it becomes a fool's prize over an asset. He's willing to fight unfavourable odds for what he believes in, and he's willing to make sacrifices that hurt his political cause if it means he can save the realm. He's not known as the king who cared by fans for nothing, you know. Love you, Manus. But while these are very kingly traits, they aren't his most kingly quality, because that honour belongs to his sense of justice. He's not a kind man, nor is he a cruel man, but for better or worse, Stannis is a fair man, with maybe a couple of mildly hypocritical exceptions. Sorry, my king, I only speak that which is true. Which finger this time? I need these to type, you know. A realm under Stannis would be one of justice, regardless of title or position. All would have their voices heard and their words heeded if laced with wisdom, regardless of their standing in society. All good acts would be rewarded, and all bad deeds would not go unpunished. Unlike Littlefinger, whose idea of meritocracy is more in service to ensuring he is the last nobody who becomes a somebody, Stannis truly believes in the ideals of valuing people based on their merit rather than their standing at birth. Obviously, the title of king would be out of reach for everyone, but anything under that divinely given right is fair game under Stannis, regardless of whether or not you were born a lord or born a peasant. You only need prove yourself worthy of the honor. Don't believe us? Just ask our good friend Sir Davos. But as much as it physically pains me to say this, Stannis, while a worthy king, is not a perfect king without flaws, because his biggest flaw as a king would be his puritanism. In a realm under Stannis, good is good and bad is bad. There is absolutely no middle ground with him, and he is nearly totally without mercy and forgiveness for those who would deny his right or the law of the land. Even being family won't save you. Nice try, Renly. This sounds grand on paper when it comes to the black and white extremes. Hard, honest work is rewarded with gold, acknowledgement and status, and murderous foul monsters like Ramsay Bolton and Gregor Clegane would absolutely get what's coming to them. But the truth is, the world is far more complicated than that, and shades of grey can quite often lace more subtle moral quandaries. As Stannis puts it, and due to this, with Stannis on the throne, you might find quite a few fathers having their hands removed for stealing a loaf of bread to feed their starving families, so to speak. Still, a realm under Stannis doesn't really sound all that bad. Just behave yourself! And you'll be fine. And that's why he's perfectly balanced in the middle of the pack. He'll always be my number one, though. Love you, Manus. On to our number 2 choice. He's taken the black, and his name is synonymous with pure white. Put them together, and this boy knows what shades of grey are. It's Jon Snow. Now, I know the McQueen memes are going to flood our comments, but let's be fair to Show Jon. He was actually a decent king in the north, and despite his vocabulary being restricted to 3 words in the final season, he showed that above all else, the lives of his subjects came first. And how in the 7 hells was he supposed to know his aunt was a crazy closeted nepho?
That's not a mispronunciation, by the way. Put 2 and 2 together, please.
Book Jon is even better king material in our opinion, as he's a touch less benevolent and a dash more callous in the books. But he's still able to inspire love and loyalty in those under his command. You know, for the most part. And Jon's most kingly trait? Selflessness. After his teenage brat phase during his early days in the Night's Watch, Jon has shown himself time and time again to be someone who will put the needs of others before his own, despite the danger it puts him in. He is willing to fight to protect his brothers, he's willing to forsake oaths in service to an actual greater cause, you paying attention, Rob, and he's willing to break bread with his enemies with whom he knows he can achieve lasting peace if he just gives a little. Jon never steps up to the plate of leadership with his own interests in mind. It's always down to the needs of others, which is quite possibly the greatest trait a leader can possess. Quite often, those most worthy of leadership are those that don't want it. And Jon's greatest flaw as a king would be impulsiveness. Now, for those who haven't read the books, Jon isn't actually stabbed by his brothers for letting the wildlings through the wall. Don't get me wrong, they aren't particularly happy about it, but they respect his decision as Lord Commander. Sir Alistair isn't even involved in the ordeal in the books at all, and no one takes any joy whatsoever in murdering Jon. It's actually quite heartbreaking as the mutineers are crying their eyes out as they do it. But I digress. What actually motivates Jon's murder in the books is his rather rash decision to muster a force and ride south to meet Ramsay Bolton, who has sent him the famous pink letter detailing his supposed defeat of Stannis and a bunch of cruel taunts. Don't worry, true believers, George has confirmed the one true king is still alive, and Ramsay is a lying sack of shit. Love you, Manus. Now, while it's definitely true Jon wants some revenge and justice for his family, his primary motivation is to actually protect the Night's Watch from Ramsay, who is far more unstable and batshit in the books. I know that's hard to believe, but trust me, it's the case. Ramsay is threatening to come and massacre the crows if they don't submit to his sociopathic whims. Jon's motivations are once again pretty selfless, but his impulsivity causes him to fail to comprehend just how badly he's skirting the line. Well, he's not even skirting. He's technically outright breaking his oaths, despite there being a devil's advocate argument that he's still serving the Watch through his actions. This is the final straw that causes the upper leadership of the Watch to have a crisis of faith in his ability to lead, and thus, stabby. This isn't an isolated incident either. Several times in the story, Jon demonstrates how easily provoked he is and needs calmer heads like Donal and Maester Aemon to talk him down. A good king needs to take a deep breath once in a while before making big decisions, and while Jon is capable of this, without wiser guiding hands, he often finds himself enslaved to his knee-jerk emotions. In fairness though, if Jon could pick his council, like we stipulated at the beginning, I'm sure Maester Aemon is a given for his Grand Maester and Samwell his hand, so it should balance him out. As for who could have taken the top spot away from the King in the North, there's only really one sound character that really does deserve some love for a change. It's good old Ned Stark. Now, Ned, Jon, and Stannis are kind of an apples, pears, and oranges argument. You can genuinely argue any of them for number one, as they all bring strengths the others lack, and they all have weaknesses the others don't, while all possessing the key ingredients for a good king. They're intelligent, great military commanders. Remember, Book Jon is 1-0 at this point, unlike his show counterpart. They'll lend their ear to their subjects regardless of standing. They're willing to stand up and fight for what they believe in, and they're very wise and just, equally seeing leadership as a duty rather than a gift of power they can then abuse. But what's giving Ned the slightest of bumps in our opinion is that while Jon is capable, he's not quite as experienced at leadership as Ned, and while Stannis' leadership style can win the hearts of the small folk, Ned's way of ruling can win the hearts of everyone, noble and commoner alike. In no way is this better demonstrated than the events preceding his death. Bear in mind that Ned dies in Book 1, and yet 5 books in, and those formerly under his rule are still conspiring to avenge his death and restore his family line that's been driven to the point of near extinction by Book 3. That goes beyond mere fealty. That goes beyond even loyalty. That's nothing short of love he's inspired in his subjects. Ned truly cared for his people, with anyone from one of his liege lords all the way down to a lowly servant welcome to take a seat at his dinner table where he would listen to their concerns while they ate with him. Ned even held compassion for those he condemned to death, able to look them in the eye and hear their last words before swinging the sword himself, all while taking zero joy from the task. In return, the people truly cared for him, even after his head was taken by that little piece of shit of an incest goblin. Play the scene of him choking, Tom. That's better. It's one thing to be respected, it's another thing entirely to be loved. And just why was Ned so loved? What was his most kingly quality? His combination of justice and honor. Ned, like Stannis, had a strong sense of justice, and make no mistake, he was incredibly firm with it, and certainly no pushover when it came to the law being upheld in his dominion, regardless of social standing. No one was safe, which is actually the reason why Jorah is living across the sea. But Ned, while firm, wasn't quite as rigid as Stannis, and his justness was tempered by his honorable nature and slightly less black and white view of morality, which led him to be much more merciful and forgiving than the Manus, who reserves his forgiveness and mercy for only those closest to him. Obviously, he does bet on the wrong horse with his mercy, which ends up getting him killed. But one must remember he didn't have the power of the throne behind him. Quite the opposite, in fact. But when one does possess the absolute power of a king, forgiveness and mercy are extremely kingly traits when employed correctly. This is partly the reason why Stannis is respected and well-liked, but also feared a little by his people, whereas Ned is respected and well-liked, but loved by his people. You could put a foot wrong with Ned without repercussions, providing it's not too far out of line. Not so much the case with Stannis. And Ned's great flaw as a king would be, we'll leave that to you guys as always. He may not be the perfect king, but in all honesty, after his performance with being Warden of the North, I think he's about as close as you're going to get within the A Song of Ice and Fire period. The North was one of the safest, least oppressive, and law-abiding regions when Ned was in charge, and that's not a coincidence. I've got a feeling most will say his honor and mercy is actually the weakness since it gets him killed. But I don't think this is an argument you can really make, due to the contrast of King's Landing and the domain of the North of which he actually had rulership. We must remember that in King's Landing, Ned is essentially playing with someone else's toy set and merely acting as a temp manager to the already hired staff, whom he is in no position to sack. Contrast this with the North, where he had king-like power and nearly every lord, fuck you Roose, who owes him fealty, being willing to die for him and avenge him even after death. You can't honestly tell me that were he the king of the Seven Kingdoms, he wouldn't gut the current council and replace it with people he could actually trust. A good manager is nothing without trained and loyal staff, etc, etc. Which leads perfectly into our question to you, the viewer. If you could pick a law-friendly small council for Ned, Stannis, Jon, Rhaegar, or Edmure, who would you pick for their masters of coin, whispers, ships, laws, Grand Maester, and their all-important hand? Let us know in the comments. Who knows, we might make a follow-up video with the best suggestions for each one.